everyone. My name is Rob Lee, as Lee just mentioned. I'm the head of faculty and the curriculum director at the SANS Institute. That's a lot of words for, I kind of help the instructors out and help develop content of what's going to show up in our courses. Really want to thank SANS, the presenters from yesterday and today, and the organizers of this, and of course Lee Whitfield, whose crazy idea this past summer, offhand on I think a Slack message back then, said, hey, we'd like to do this cyber camp for teens. And they said, yeah, let's do it. It's going to be great. And then of course, they were asking me on, to attend both of these, and both of these ended up landing right in the middle when I was on vacation. I'm actually on vacation today, and but I still signed up to want to give this presentation for everyone, because I think it's super important to have a chat with all the parents and all the teens and kids that are interested in the cybersecurity and cyber career fields that are out there, because it is an amazing time to be in this field if you haven't noticed everything that's going on in the press and the world these days. I want to give you a quick overview of what I'm going to talk about today. Number one, I kind of want to give you a brief overview of what people think cybersecurity is, when you kind of hear about it from your neighbors and so forth. Number two, I'm going to talk generically about what it takes in terms of personality traits, someone really who's good at this in any of the variety of cyber paths that you might end up on. What is the best type of individual, and what kind of things would you want to have to work on, personality-wise, to really grow in this field? And then finally, I'm going to start diving into, if cybersecurity is something that you're really interested in, I really want to take you down some of the niche areas that exist in cybersecurity. Of course, we always have the pop movies and everything else that, people watch, which you kind of give a hint, but, in terms of what actually people do in their career paths, kind of give a broad overview of each one of these as you go through it. And then, of course, at the end, we'll open it up for some questions, hopefully, that if we have any time. So I want to start off with a brief history of hacking. Most people who are aware of what cybersecurity is probably first introduced to it through television and movies. There's always that group of individuals that always have someone sitting in the bat cave somewhere with a headset, tippity-tappity onto the keyboard anytime that they need to hack into the feed to be able to watch the video cameras or anything. This is interesting as a concept, and you see it in almost every single television show. Now, I have 9-year-old twins, and even on things like Paw Patrol, you see them watching some sort of little dog hacker that is like all of a sudden breaking into something in the television show. I'm sitting there like my mind is blown that almost every single one of these, all the way down to the early kids television shows, has some sort of individual that is technically astute, that likes computers, that is a key part of the team. Ironically, they're not far off from the truth, is that in today's society, when we end up taking a look at this, every group of individuals, organization that's out there, including your families, you could probably point to the one or two individuals that is the tech support. So think about that for a second. When you think of your own family and you think about, wow, when the Wi-Fi goes down, who is the person that everyone turns to and says, hey, is the Wi-Fi out? Or are you doing something with the Wi-Fi? I always get blamed every time I come and visit home that as soon as I leave, as soon as the Wi-Fi is out, I get a call from my mom saying, hey, did you mess with the Wi-Fi? And I said, no, I didn't do anything this time, but I have been blamed for it in the past. But the key concept here is that there's always, in every organization, in every group, someone that is tuned into being the technophile, the person who loves the computers, who will say, hey, no problem, I'll get the TV functioning, I'll log you into the thing, I'll get it going. If that's kind of your personality, if you are the person in the family right now that everyone already turns to and is saying, hey, tech support, can you help me? And you take their phones and you go tippity-tappity, okay, I have it all set up for you, here you go. You're key for a cyber security career field, because you already like the technology. And I just realized I have a major misspelling here in the middle of this. I'm very embarrassed. It shows I should probably actually look at my screens here before I actually do that. All right, so I was more focusing on the memes I was putting in here versus when I was typing this on the plane. All right, so the one thing, the meme that's in here on the left-hand side is that hackers, after typing 2 letters in movies, always say, "I'm in." That is really not the reality of what happens behind the scenes when you're talking about cybersecurity. In reality, people who learn these skills and want to be the best individual there is, it takes years and years and years and years of education and training, and it never honestly ends. The interesting thing when we start talking about cybersecurity as a field to get into is that unlike other sciences, unlike other fields of study, there is no hard science of truth when it comes to computers, meaning that the field is still moving forward, and what was truth a year ago may no longer be its truth today. Take for example, physics. When you drop an item at a certain height, you know exactly how to calculate the acceleration it is going to travel before it hits the earth. If that is a constant, there's certain constants that exist in other fields, but in cybersecurity, that may not be the case. In cybersecurity in general, you end up having new capabilities, new inventions, new things that are consistently being bombarded the field with, and you always have to be learning new. It would help to potentially back up a little bit and talk about my background to really explain how this is kind of true. When I was in college, of course, everyone in high school, and I actually frown on a lot of guidance counselors and people who are telling someone who's 16, 17 years old, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they're looking at this thing, and I say, well, I don't know. When I was 16 or 17, what I was going into, I was going to go be a part of NASA. I wanted to be a part of the space field. I really wanted, anything and all things space related. I loved it. When I ended up going to the Air Force Academy, the Surface Academy, I majored in that field. The space operations and astronautical engineering was my background, and that's what I focused on all 4 years that I was there. And during that time frame, there were also, a lot of computers that were thrown at me. We had to do programming languages and a bunch of stuff behind the scenes. But what ended up happening during that time frame is that apparently you needed good color vision. It was the same reason I couldn't go become a pilot out of the Air Force Academy, is that I have a slight red-green color vision issue. And so I wasn't pilot qualified, but apparently in order to go into the space operations field, you still needed the same qualification. So I was like, what am I gonna do? It was around this time that the career field, and it really was this brand new thing at that point in cyber, they called it at that point information warfare, kind of came up, and I was interested in it, started attending seminars and met some of the people at that point. And, they were looking to recruit people. And because I was kind of without a job and I liked computers and I was good at them, I got picked up into this brand new experimental unit down in South Carolina called the 609th Information Warfare Squadron. Now, the reason I mention this, here's like, what does this have to do about me? What's your point, Rob? I didn't know anything at that point. I was trained to learn how to put a satellite into orbit. And I was able to do things on computers that others couldn't do. But in terms of having people look at me and rely on me to actually know what I'm doing on a computer system in order to defend it from attack, I was clueless. I had no idea. And of course, what the secret was at this point, no one knew what they were doing. No one had that kind of mindset. But I was worried behind the scenes that people would think of me as a fraud, that somehow I was given this job that I really didn't know what I was doing, because this is true through today. We actually, there's a term in the industry that is called the imposter syndrome, that, people look to you like you actually know what you're doing, but deep down inside you think, oh, I actually don't know if I'm actually qualified for this. And so you're worried someone's going to call you out on your expertise and call you out and saying, you actually really don't know what you're talking about. You should not be talking right now. And so everyone is kind of constantly has this weighing on them. The challenge here, though, is that everyone feels this in this field, including the best experts, all the way down to those who are new. And if you're new, you actually kind of have an excuse to start out in the field. It's like, well, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm going to learn. But as you progress later, people are going to still look to you. It's like, well, that individual knows a little bit more. And so I'll ask them a question. Hopefully they'll know the answer. And then the imposter syndrome sets in. You get worried that someone's going to not know that you actually don't know everything in this field. And so the first thing you have to wrestle with, which is, number one, if you like technology, understand you're going to be constantly learning it. From that point forward, and I didn't realize this at the time, I was 22 years old in my first job in South Carolina. And I was like pulling out books and just reading books and how to do it and how to figure it out, and having mentors who were able to be very patient with me, sitting down and saying, oh, you're doing it wrong. The command is, grep. And then you have to use this other command called awk. And I'm like, I've never heard of this. It sounds like you're throwing up. And, it's like, oh, that's funny, but the real thing that it was really struggling for me was I felt like I should know it. I felt like I didn't give myself a break on how much I really thought I was supposed to have mastered at that point. But, and that's the thing I'll tell you, if you're new to this field, give yourself a break. There's no ring that once you cross that line, all of a sudden you are now considered done. Done is a word that does not exist in the learning aspect in cybersecurity because the science is still progressing. They just launched 5G networks today. That's going to change everything when it comes to the amount of internet connected devices that will exist and that we're going to have to secure, that no one knows how the communication protocols exist between these devices. And it also opens up new doors for attack and vulnerabilities, because the consumer products that are out there are developed for the individual consumer in mind. It's not ever a security first perspective. And so there's always going to be something that someone overlooked and didn't realize existed. And there's always going to be something else for someone to learn as a part of this. So, as I move through my career, and I'll touch base on some other things here, I finally became comfortable with myself and saying, I am just always going to be learning. And it's not one of those things you say, well, if I don't know it, I'll look it up. Some of these things you can't look up. There is no thing to look up. You ran into the end of the road. You're looking at this, abyss and saying, I can't find the answer. I don't even understand this. And that's where it comes into like level 2 of like your knowledge is, well, I guess I have to go figure it out myself. And that's really where that hacking mentality comes into play. So this is where I'm going to talk about the personalities. In order for you to be extremely good at this career field, if you decide to go into it, if this is something that you want and you say, I'm going to be good at this, is that there are 3 things. And I look for these 3 things. And a big hat tip to one of my initial mentors in the field, individual named Paul Myrick, worked with me when I was in the government, doing a lot of, cool stuff at that point. But, he basically said, and it was a mantra of his, which I picked up on, and the 3 areas that he said that will make someone a success, regardless of the career field, even if you don't choose cybersecurity. This is true if you're going to become a doctor, an engineer, an architect, if you're going to be the best artist out there, you need to have these 3 traits. Otherwise, you probably will fail. The first is you have to be passionate about your chosen career field. You have to love it. You get to the point where people are paying you to do the thing that you love. When I'm at home and I have my laptop open and I'm watching something on the TV and it's 9 p.m. at night, I have my kids and, anyone else is in the room with me, my wife, saying, are you working or are you playing? And I look at them and I actually don't know how to answer that question, because the answer is yes to both. Because you have a passion for the career field, everything that's about it, including the things that you're researching and playing, is like, well, this is actually not work to me. I don't feel like I'm working. I feel like I'm learning. So there's this constant passion that you have about it, that you just love it so much that you wake up, every single thing you're absorbing, anything is anyone's throwing you. You're gathering mentors. You're asking people questions consistently. The second one is your desire to be an expert, is that you don't want to just learn enough. You want to truly understand the topic. It annoys you when you're, someone throws a question, you have an idea for a question, and then the person that answers it, you don't need to worry about that. I said, well, explain that to me a little bit more. I'd really like to understand why this one-off area even exists. New technologies are released, and you want to understand how are they able to do that? How are the capabilities in that thing that now exists exist? How does streaming work versus something that is on Disney Plus? Is it really the same thing? Is it using the same backbone? All of these different things that exist out there, you're constantly trying to figure out how it works. And if that annoys you, you start looking at how websites are developed. You're looking at how protocols are. You're looking at how different, you definitely know you're in there if you're playing video games and you're thinking about, I wonder if I could cheat on this video game by hacking a little bit. Again, all fits in that desire to be an expert. As a part of this, I always go back to people that I was interviewing in my previous jobs, that when we always found a candidate that was really good, I was always able to find, and even if they're brand new to the field, it's like, nothing about cybersecurity. You want this first job. It's an internship or something like that. And I'm asking them all these questions. They said, I really like it. I'd like it to be given a chance. I have no experience though, so I'm not an expert. So what I end up doing is I peel back the onion a little bit and saying, well, tell me about something that you took on that, you drove past, that which is going to tie into the third one here, that point in which others say, oh, this is hard. I give up. I'm done. I'm out the door. This is, difficult. And usually I'll be able to tap into the individual, by saying, well, I took up golf last summer, and, my dad played golf. I never really played golf before, and I really wanted to join him playing golf. And the individual will say, well, I didn't know how to play golf, so I just stuck at it. And, I'm not a great golfer, but at least I'm, double bogey, triple bogey at this point. At least I'm out there with my dad, and that's all I care about. The fact that they were able to get through, hey, I became good enough to be able to hang with my dad at that point was phenomenal. Or you potentially say someone learned a foreign language because, there was an exchange student who spoke a foreign language and they were trying to have dialogue with them. And so a lot of people say, well, learn a language. They get through a couple of days of it and saying, oh, actually learning languages is hard. They're like, nope, I want to be able to at least order food with the individual or say please and thank you and make that effort. Those are the types of things that you're saying, you don't need to be 100% knee deep into the I'm a full expert side, but just the fact that it exists, that you are willing to get through the point in which everyone else quits. And that's the last one, is you need to be willing to fail and be okay with it. If you are working through anything, it says, wow, this is hard. I'm stuck. Can't figure out how to solve this complex problem. And, in some cases, that means that you're turning in assignments that, have an incorrect answer on it. It's like, well, I couldn't figure it out. I tried to get help on it and I'm done. But again, when you get to that point, even though you already have your grade, but you're still working through well, exactly what was my approach? What did I get wrong in that? And then you're willing to fail to learn. And that's really where the key aspect of all these things above kind of fall into, is that people who are good at this field or any field that's out there have to accept that it's going to get hard and difficult at some point, and you will not master it immediately. You actually have to be willing to, hey, I'm going to be horrible at this, and even make fun of yourself for it. Hey, I'm the horrible individual. Don't ask me how to do it, but I'm here. I'm present. I'm willing to learn. But probably if you want me to actually get it right, and probably it's not going to happen the first time. You can even make a joke of it initially, but then, after about 2 to 3 years of this, people say, hey, you actually know something now. And then that imposter syndrome comes in. And you have to constantly weigh that down on both sides of you when you're working through these particular issues when it comes to it. So moving forward is like, what types of cybersecurity areas exist? Which ones would you be kind of interested in and moving into? And, when you hear cybersecurity, they just, typically think of, it's the hacker, that's, the person back in the bat cave with the headset. But in reality, cybersecurity and IT in general are closely related. We have a lot of people who start in IT and move over into information security and vice versa. It's mostly because, it's like, hey, that's interesting. I'd like to do that. Of course, everyone says, well, what am I going to get paid? How am I going to be able to, will I be able to afford an apartment? I'll tell you, I don't know how the field is going to change over the next, 5 to 10 years. I personally know that there's a lot of 20-year-olds are doing very well for themselves who've taken on cybersecurity as a career field. Will it continue to be that way? I don't know. Will you definitively be able to make a career out of this? Yes, more so now than ever because of the things I mentioned earlier. So if this is a career field that you're interested in, the first one I always tell you to take a look at is just being a generic cybersecurity blue team defender that is charged with defending a network, defending devices, defending, making sure that the access of these networks is controlled. And as a part of that is not just the architecture and the design of it to make sure that we don't have a bunch of holes that someone can exploit. We go into the example that just happened with SolarWinds. This is a big oops moment. Again, there's a lot of oops moments in here, but the fact that you have not only your own stuff in your own network, that you have to have third-party devices. You have all these different capabilities that you're bringing into your own organization. You have to trust that those organizations are doing their jobs too to make sure that they're not inserting their own backdoors into it. And that's where SolarWinds kind of happened, is that as a result of an update, or maybe the code wasn't checked correctly, the fact that it got uploaded and distributed to so many organizations is, how do we defend against that? And this is where a lot of folks who are working through the cybersecurity engineering side right now are scratching their heads and saying, what do we do? How do we defend this? And how do we detect it once someone's inside? And, so as a part of the blue team side, and I'll mention this, it ties into the next field in incident response and digital forensics, which is once you are compromised to go investigate it, but you have this front end side, which is how do we know we are even compromised? It's not like what you think in the movies in which you have two teams, red versus blue, pounding against each other like in some sort of cyber paintball war. That's not what's going on. The key here, if you're working in the defense side, is that your aggressors, those that are trying to break into your organization, are trying to do so without alerting the fact that they're there, without alerting their presence. And so it's a game of stealth. It's a game of spy versus spy. And you are in charge, just like in, I almost hate to say, airport security, you're responsible for making sure nothing bad ever happens. And that's a huge task, but it's also one of the more interesting ones because it's a consistent problem to solve. And every organization has to deal with it, including the organization of the family at home, is that you have to make sure you're protecting your own number of devices. And that's a question you have, go look in your own Wi-Fi router or whatever's assigning your IP addresses in at home. How many devices does your household have at this point? And I guarantee the number's much larger than most people realize. How do we make sure each one of those devices isn't allowing something in that we didn't know about at that point? So the overall cybersecurity engineer is basically those who are in charge of defense and detection of looking for anything that's bad, but also securing it to the point where it reduces the chance of bad ever happening. And that last piece there is really key, is that, a lot of movies and everything else that you hear about making it a defensible network that no one can ever penetrate into, those things don't exist. It's the unicorns don't exist. This doesn't exist either. If you are targeted by an extremely thoughtful and well-funded adversary, they will eventually be able to break in. The question is, can you detect them soon enough so they don't achieve their objectives, which is what it is that they're potentially after. My first job at the 609th was I was defending 9th Air Force bases from internet attack. It was during the time, and again, this is like shows how ancient I am. There was another solar event that happened back in 1997. The event was called Solar Sunrise. At that point, it was thought to be Iraq who was attacking the Pentagon, but ended up being some teenagers in California and being mentored by another hacker in Israel. But again, at that point, everyone was worried that it was some major cyber onslaught that was going to occur at that point. And I give a lot of credit to all the rest of the things I did in my career is having the defensive background set first and really understanding how things work. Now, the skills I had back then are not applicable today because the field's changed. What we were defending back then were simple things like FTP and Telnet, which people don't worry about near as much anymore. They completely block those. But at that point, it was a brand new thing. So I cannot use the skills I learned over 20 years ago to become a decent cyber defender today. Your skills have progressed. All the technology and ways to do that have also progressed. All right. The second one I'll talk about is digital forensics. When I left the 609th down in South Carolina, I was pulled into the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. It was a unit I was in charge of called the Technical Monitoring Team. So in this case, my job was to work with agents who were investigating incidents that happened in the Air Force when an intrusion event happened, meaning that a hacker broke into an Air Force network. They would call us in. We would be the tech people, just like you see on the TV in this case, sit at the desk, but it's much less sexy than what you believe, is that we had to figure out how they broke in. And we had to do it through both setting up wiretaps and monitoring the network, looking for where the attacker was, but also starting to do digital forensics on the affected devices. And this is, way before there was any software that was out there on learning how to do and track adversary activity inside the network. And the thing about digital forensics is it's really when bad things happen, these individuals are called to come in and respond to it, investigate it, and make recommendations as to how to prevent the attack in the future. And then that is potentially then trebucheted over back to the blue team defenders to say, well, how do we potentially prevent that based on what they found? So digital forensics is a blue team field, but it's mostly when bad things happen, this is the team that comes in and does the response. And this is where I spent a large portion of my career honing my skills. Initially, it was on network forensics, then Unix forensics, then Windows forensics. But just like if someone asks me, well, how good are you at smartphone forensics? I'll say, I have no idea what I'm doing. I mean, I understand the concepts behind it. I understand what's possibly there, but I've never done a smartphone in my life. I rely on others who are experts in smartphone forensics to be able to do that smartphone analysis. So even within these subfields, there's their own niches that you potentially get into, and each one of them has as much knowledge as you would find if you're becoming a doctorate and then taking a niche field saying, I'm going to become a podiatrist or I'm going to become a neurosurgeon, is that you end up having to say, okay, here's my understand the basics of being a doctor, then I'm going to take the field a step further. And so each one of these has as much knowledge out there as possible when you're potentially approaching this. I found a lot of fun for hunting the bad guys in these networks, and we started hunting back then too. The first major incident that I was in was, again, over 20 years ago in 1998. It was a nation-state attacker. It was one of the first times that it really became public that we had a nation-state attacker hitting research installations and across the United States at that point. It was the Russians. And the Russians were attacking multiple locations. And we were basically using our knowledge of their tools, techniques, and procedures of how they're working. All right. For offensive operations. This one's really interesting because people say you cannot make a career out of being an attacker. That is patently incorrect. Today, especially more so than ever, a lot of organizations are very interested in seeing how attackers think, operate, and might be able to break in their own networks. This is like you saw the movies that are out there. One of the best movies you could probably go watch to really kind of understand what the concept here is a movie called Sneakers. I know it's old, has Robert Redford and a bunch of other folks in it. And you're like, wow, I think that guy's like really old. Yeah, they're really old, but they have this concept of how do you break in an organization to be able to see where they're vulnerable. And it encompasses not only human interaction, we try to exploit the human, but also network and host-based exploitation to be able to see how someone breaks into a network to be able to do that. Today, we use this across the board for being able to examine whether applications are vulnerable, how attackers might be able to break in. We even have a lot of organizations, usually the larger ones, will actually pay groups to emulate specific type of nation state adversaries. And they call that threat emulation. There's also an aspect of this that blue team defenders become better blue team defenders if they learn how to be a red team attacker using offensive skills, how to break in the network, because once they learn how to break into something, they actually learn how to defend it better. This is called purple teaming because it has the red and blue together, and they really have this sharing of knowledge back and forth that says, in order for me to defend something, I need to know how an attacker thinks in order to break in. And that's where this amalgamation of both sides end up really crossing over. And it's one of the things when I was in the field, and I worked in offensive operations for some point, but my digital forensics background really helped out inform the offensive side of what I was learning at that point, and vice versa. And now, after I worked in the offensive side for a while, my digital forensics skills actually exploded because I realized what I didn't know at that point. Again, in that consistent learning umbrella environment that you find yourself in. And so the offensive operations, it's you also have, the military, the cyber warfare stuff that exists in there. And those fields definitively exist across the planet too. Again, the way I try to categorize it, you're trying to hack for the good guys. But, the major employment factor here for offensive operations is, like I was saying, is that you're teaching organizations how to defend against a really well-skilled attacker. And it also helps inform the defense here a lot. So a lot of people see that this is hacking, this is the way to go forward. I have found if people ask me, should I go directly into offense? I would actually tell them no. I would say start with defense initially, and then move into offense. There's a lot of people say, well, I'd like to do both. That's fine too. But I've actually seen people succeed a little bit better by moving from defense to offense as a part of their, if I'm going to make the wrongs of learning, where would I go? Part of the reason why is that offensive stuff tends to age out more quickly than the defensive stuff. What worked yesterday is not going to work today as soon as it's patched. So there's certain truths to it, but it's such a consistently evolving field that it's a week-to-week update basis that you have to be on versus some of the ones on defense where you have to say, okay, if we're practicing good hygiene, making sure people are not, getting hit with phishing attacks and so forth, but the concept of the offensive operation exists the same. The last one I'll mention to you here, and this is kind of an amalgamation between several of the fields and blue team and everything else, which is talking about ICS security. And ICS security really is dealing with those parts of society. I know Robert and Emily talked about this a lot yesterday too, but when you're starting to talk about infrastructure security, where the electrical grid, where you end up even having the stoplights outside, everything in what you see outside is now connected to a network somehow. And going back to the standard EE classes, some of those things are programmed on these devices that are really old. That basically it's a turn switch left, turn switch right, and basically it's a stoplight. At that point, says either go, not go. But there's something that's controlling it on the back end side that is then connected to a network, and then attackers will try to reach in to get to these devices to do whatever. I mean, and this is where the movies have done a very fantastic job of trying to explain this, but it's also a very fascinating field that I really recommend folks look into after you initially progress through the blue team side. So to close out this presentation, a lot of people say, well, where do I start? Where do I begin? Is that there are many ways into cybersecurity, but don't forget about the personality traits that I told you. It doesn't matter if you get a cert first or you get a formal education. If you're willing to just learn on any technology base that's in front of you, the CyberStart program, the CTF, sign up for every single thing that's free, get free books. There's a ton of them. Use Google. There's magazines that back in the late 90s, early 2000s, we read consistently called FRAC. I mean, there's so many resources out there you don't have to spend any money on and still get going. And then look for opportunities. Even if you're working at Best Buy in the Geek Squad as an intern, anything that is consistently exposing you to technology is going to be another point forward in your path to becoming an expert, just as long as you have this passionate desire to be an expert and willingness to fail. I also recommend do not specialize too soon. Be open to many different ideas of what cybersecurity could do. The third one, a lot of people will take me to task on this one, But no, you do not need to code first. Coding is something that I'd recommend that you learn along the way, or at least be familiar with. Master one language a bit, but are you coding on a daily basis? You ask anyone in cybersecurity, the answer is no. But the coding fundamentals that it exposes you to in terms of the computer science things that are important, that is going to be fundamental. How those things work behind the scenes is going to translate perfectly into the cybersecurity career field. Do you need to code on a daily basis? No. It's more just like everyone in school eventually has to take a foreign language class. Yes, just like that. Take a language class at some point, become familiar with it. Even though I don't code on a daily basis anymore, those coding fundamentals that I end up having are still educating me on a day-to-day basis. As I said before, take part in all the online programs, competitions that you could get a hand of. James Lyons' CTF, with Lauren's CyberStart program. Understand what you're getting yourself into there, but it's fun. And then finally, the last two aspects of this is I'll start with the last one. Never stop learning. Always understand that no one is an expert. Challenge those who are affirmative. The two words I always like to throw at people who are saying, oh, this is exactly what's happening. Cool, show me. Especially when you're new, those two words are very powerful. Can you show me how that works? And some cases like, well, you get this, hand wavy thing that sometimes occurs. Just understand that they may be bluffing there too. They actually may not know what they're talking about. And that's where you start to realize, wow, no one actually knows everything. Once you get there, you're in the right spot. And then finally, this was a very, very, very important one. The more you learn, the more you have to understand, with great power comes great responsibility. You will be able to do things with your newfound superpowers others cannot do. You have to realize that you cannot cross the line when you're looking at how you're employing these skills in your day-to-day life. You can find yourself in trouble just experimenting, and just understand, if you have questions on that, get a mentor. This is why a lot of people set up their own home networks to be able to do things on their own stuff. Just, understand, if you don't personally own it, you need to get permission to talk to someone about using your newfound superpower skills against that. The online programs, competition, really good thing in there, but even those, you have to sign up, you have to accept EULA, all those things that are involved there. Understand that as you're learning, you're going to learn things no one else has the capability of understanding, but just with great power comes great responsibility. And with that, I'm going to open it up to any questions that folks have. I really appreciate being invited to give this talk, and I hope you have a couple takeaways that come from it. Thank you.